Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hope you are doing well on this Tuesday evening. I am joined here by the Illinois District Historian for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Brother Chuck Smoot, and I am Leonard C. McKinnis II, the District Director for Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated in the state of Illinois. Listen, we are live tonight on multiple platforms, YouTube and Facebook. Do us a favor, go ahead and share this. There might be others in your networks, friends, family, or otherwise, who are curious about the conversation that's going to unfold here this evening, and what a conversation that is. Brother Smoot, we've heard these stories over the past few months. It seems that they have really, reaching this climax of individuals who have determined that they cannot reconcile their membership in Black Greek letter organizations with their Christian faith in particular. There might be other faith traditions who are also going through this, but we notice that it seems more on the Christian side of things. And so this evening, we are hoping to have a substantive conversation with an extraordinary group of scholars and pastors who are here to engage this question about, is it possible to reconcile one's identity in the Black Greek letter organization with their faith tradition? In just a moment, I'm going to turn this over to Smoot, our historian in the District of Illinois. I'm going to go to the background and let Brother Smoot introduce the panelists for this evening. Listen, I ask you to engage us this evening. Feel free to engage the panelists using the function to chat. We can see the chats, and we look forward to a spirited conversation. But most of all, we look forward perhaps to transmitting knowledge to those of you who might be pondering and wondering, is it possible to remain in my Black Greek organization and also true to my faith commitments? I, for one, believe that it is. Since 2001, I have been a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and I am also deeply rooted in my faith tradition. And with that being said, Brother Smoot, how are you this evening?
I am doing well, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing well. Here's a question before we, turn this over to you and bring our panelists onto the stage this evening. What for you would be a successful evening out of this conversation tonight? What are you looking for as the historian in the District of Illinois, and also someone who sits as a part of our regional historical commission from this dialogue this evening?
Well, I think first I want to thank you and applaud you for putting this together. I appreciate it. We were on a like mind. You mentioned it to me before I could mention it to you, so that seems to be how we operate at times since I've been your historian. But I think in terms of what makes it successful is for us to have an honest dialogue about our viewpoints and opinions, to be respectful of those who have chosen to go a different way. But one of the things that has been missing in these conversations has been the voices of brothers like yourself or myself, or even one or two of the panelists on who do have positions. Our organizations should be talking about this, but also there are those of us. I mean, we've got as I'll lay out in a minute, we got a panel full of preachers, and one thing is to show how there are others, very learned, erudite, and astute ministers and preachers of the gospel who have connected their faith and their membership, and to hear from those who have learned and studied the faith, but also labored in the vineyard of our organizations, so to speak. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking, and I'm hoping to get some good feedback from our audience as well.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go backstage and let you bring the panelists forward, Brother Smoot. Before I do that, let me acknowledge in their absence the General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Brother Dr. Willis Laundert III. And let me acknowledge my Midwestern Regional Vice President, Brother Franklin L. Stacy. And with that being said,
he's my fan,
All right. And so with that being said, Brother Smoot, good luck tonight, and we're looking forward to this conversation. I will allow you to introduce your panel for.
All right. Thank you, Brother McKinnis. And before we get too much, before I bring the panelists on, I just do want to do a couple of quick things of housekeeping. One, this is a part of our ongoing series of doing fireside chat discussions. We did a number of discussions during Black History Month. I invite you all to go to our YouTube page, go to our Facebook page, and look at those. Look at those discussions. We had discussions with lawmakers, with educators. Brother McInnes was actually one of them. We had a conversation with one of the first Black forensic dentists in the world. So we've done some interesting conversations, and we're going to be doing some more to come. We're going to be doing in a couple of weeks a discussion on men's health and the necessity for particularly Black men to look towards our health. Right before I bring the panelists on, I do want to acknowledge, I just recognize that our Midwestern Regional Executive Director, Brother Quincy Banks, has joined us. So, Brother Banks, we are glad to have you with us, and we will acknowledge others as they come on. As Brother McInnes did mention, please like and subscribe, particularly on our YouTube channel, so you can stay abreast on the discussions that we will be having, and you can go back and look at the previous discussions. Now, with that said, Brother McInnes, if you can bring our panel, our distinguished panel on, and I'm going to introduce them. I'm going to introduce them in alphabetical order as soon as everybody gets on the panel. I see we have, all right, and we are looking good. So Dr. Jakes, Dr. Russell, Dr. Watkins, Dr. Woods, thank you all for coming. It is a pleasure for you all to have you all here and to engage in this discussion. Let me get the bios done real quick. Now, Dr. McInnes ordered me not to read you all's entire bios because we'll be here, probably until about midnight. So I'm going to abridge a couple of things. I'm going to start, like I said, alphabetical order. My dear brother, Reverend Dr. L. Bernard Jakes, who is the pastor of the West Point Baptist Church here in Chicago. Brother Jakes is a graduate. He earned his bachelor's from Elmhurst University, where he became a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. And he also got his master's. You got your MDiv from Garrett, is that correct? He got his MDiv from Garrett and his doctorate of ministry from the United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. He has been a fierce advocate for social justice, both locally here in Chicago in the state and across the country. He has been actively engaged with policymakers trying to advance the cause of not only Christians, but advance the cause of Black people. And we are just very happy to have you here. I want to also mention that Brother Jakes is the regional chaplain for Midwestern Regional Chaplain for Alpha Phi Alpha. Brother Jakes, it is a pleasure to have you here. How your ankles doing, brother?
It's good to be here. We'll talk after this is over.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Next is my sister, the Reverend Dr. Kimberly D. Russell, and she is a native of Chicago. She went to a high school that I will not name for obvious reasons. For some people will understand that. No, she attended Kenwood Academy, later attended Spelman College. And is that where you pledged? Am I remembering that correctly?
Absolutely right. New Pi chapter, college.
Mu Pi chapter, the great chapter at Spelman. She has been named one of the 6 Black women at the Center of Gravity in Theological Education by NBCnews.com. She is an ordained elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Full disclosure, Sister Russell and I come out of the same home church, that is Greater Institutional AME Church. I'm gonna say it. I said it to you privately. I'm gonna say it again. If your sisters are here, they cannot heckle me. So we're not gonna play today. All right. I do also want to mention that she has been involved with the Society of Biblical Literature of the Society of Biblical Literature, the American Academy of Religion, the Society for the Study of Black Religion, and the National Black MBA Association. And she currently is a professor at the Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. Is that correct? And she just received tenure last Friday. So give her a hand. Congratulations. We are so very proud of you, Sister Russell, and we are very, very happy to have you here. Next up is the distinguished Dr. Michelle Watkins, who is an assistant professor of theology at St. John's University in Queens, New York. They got you out to New York, huh? They took you away from us. Our areas of expertise are in systematic Black and womanist and patriotist theologies, with an interest in the continuities between African American religion and Orthodox theology more broadly. She is a celebrated author, the author of The Deification of the Desacralized, Critical Correlations Among Womanist and Orthodox Theologies, which is currently under review, and the co-author of Unmasking Racism, Coloring with Love for the Church, Community, and Academy. And she is a member of Delta Sigma Theta. And I neglected to mention earlier, Sister Rosa is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. And last but certainly not least, we have the Reverend Dr. Virgil Woods. My brother, how are you? It's good to see you here. Brother Woods holds a bachelor's degree in business from Upper Iowa University. He earned his master's degree and doctorate of ministry from Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary, which is on the campus of Northwestern University. He is also a prolific author. He has authored 4 books, including You're the Pastor, Now What?, Think Like a Fish, Seeing Your Church Through the Eyes of the Unchurched, The 30-Day God Challenge, 30 Days to Spiritual Fitness, and 10 Tips for a Better Church Website, all of which are available on Amazon.com. He is the pastor of the First AME Church in Gary, Indiana. They stole him away from Chicago as well, as being the former pastor Grant Memorial. Remember those days well. And he has served in a number of capacities, including on the boards for Boys and Girls Club, the Golden Apple Board, and chairman of the Alpha Phi Alpha Martin Luther King Scholarship Program, which serves males that are going to college. He was recognized by Rockford's Minority Business Owners as Community Leader of the Year in 2010. So I do want to welcome and thank you all for joining us today. I know you all have very busy schedules, so we're going to try not to keep you too long. But let's, before we get into the discussion, what we want to do is we want to play a little clip. So it's one of the things that has kicked off a lot of this discussion recently was the news of the young lady at Howard University who, right after being initiated into Delta Sigma Theta, penned a public letter renouncing and denouncing her sorority. And what we want to do is play a little snippet of her letter so we can just to provide a little bit of context. So Brother McKinnis, can you play a portion of that letter, please?
As of May 1st, 2024, I have informed Alpha Chapter of my decision to depart and have appropriately given all paraphernalia / anything affiliated in any capacity back to members of the organization. Before I was invited to join the organization, despite all of the research and information I had gathered, I was not aware of the specific requirements needed to become an official member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. As I detailed these requirements, I want to emphasize that they were my non-negotiables from the beginning, and that while I did initially compromise on them, this is not something I am willing to continue compromising on under any circumstances. Pyramid pinning and the induction ceremony. For both of these ceremonies, there were quite a few things that occurred. In order to continue with membership, I had to go to a ceremonial table, kneel down, and recite 2 different oaths regarding my now lifetime commitment to Delta Sigma Theta. Prior to going up to the ceremonial table and reading the vow, I vividly remember the president stating that the oath I was about to take would follow me until final judgment and are now obligations that I can never be freed. And she quotes, "Now you are about to take upon yourself vows and obligations from which you can never be freed. They will follow you to the final judgment. Before we proceed further into the ceremony, I shall ask each of you by name to affirm that you, of your own free will and accord, seek admission into Delta Sigma Theta sorority by saying, 'I do.'"
Okay, so that is a portion of the letter that was shared publicly. And that seems to have obviously kicked off a firestorm. Now there have been a number of denouncements that preceded her. A couple other ones that came out of Howard University. One young man, similarly, who had just been initiated into Alpha Phi Alpha, did denounce maybe about a month or so after he was initiated. And there have been a spate of other denouncements that have popped up on social media. So let me start off the discussion here, and I want to start with you, Sister Watkins, since unfairly but fairly, that since that was about your organization. But when you first heard of that, what was your response? What were your thoughts? How did you receive that?
So thank you, Dr. Smoot. Thank you to the esteemed members on the panel. It is a blessing and a privilege to be a part of this conversation. My first thought cannot be shared publicly. My second thought was, is this another incidence of white Christian nationalism in blackface? Is this a demonstration of the failure of faith communities to equip our young people, at least by the age of 19, 20 years old, collegiates, to be able to discern the markers of white Christian nationalism and its legacy? Are we equipping them to be good theological interpreters of their world and space? And this was a demonstrative indication that we have work to do. So those were my initial thoughts. I don't want to take up too much time with that, but those were my initial thoughts in terms of, as a theologian, and thinking about the theological lens that our sister was using to make these critical decisions about her life.
Now, let me follow up. When you said that whether this was a part of a thing with white Christian nationalism, can you expand upon that a little bit, of what your thoughts and how you might see that being manifest?
Yes. So there are certain markers of white Christian nationalism, and most of the time when we are speaking in conversation or hearing from some of our brothers and sisters who have chosen to renounce and publicly denounce, there is a knowledge gap when it comes to, or ahistoricism in terms of the relationship between the use and deployment and weaponizing of Christianity to interrogate and devalue Black culture, Black persons, and the cultural formations that we have created to humanize ourselves in the midst of dehumanization. For the purposes of clarity, and this is something that I can share more on a grand scale, I do have an infographic on some of these markers so that these can be palatable to your average layperson.
Okay. All right. Now, Brother Jakes, let me ask you, when you hear of things like this, or when you hear of people who are talking about denouncing, like, what is your reaction? Like, how have you traditionally handled that?
Traditionally, Brother Smoot, and to everyone on here, I'm glad to be here with you. My initial response differs from many because I choose not to give it any attention. Yeah, I think that what ends up happening is that with the spotlight also comes the heat, and sometimes we can focus so much on the minor that we miss the major.
Mm-hmm.
So even when the young lady made her proclamation on the heels of someone else making their proclamation, I listened as a local pastor, or just as a man who ascribes to the Christian faith, who's been a member of a Black Letter Greek organization for close to 30 years. Initially my thoughts are in a less intelligent way of how Dr. Watkins said it is that they have been spoon-fed white theology and have no mind of their own. And then I just move on from there, because for me, it's a matter of, and I put this on a post, I believe it was on May 3rd, that there's so many other things that we really could be dealing with. And now we've made the renouncing and denouncing where the squeaky wheel is getting the oil. So that's really my response to it initially, and when I see it.
Now, Sister Russell, have you encountered any individuals who have either denounced or had questions about issues of handling both their faith and their membership? And if so, how have you, or how would you handle a situation like that?
Thank you so much for the question. Also, I want to preface my comments with saying, particularly delighted to be here this evening because I'm the daughter of a man of Alpha Phi Alpha.
Yes, you are.
My dad is somewhere in heaven, just peacock proud that I'm on the internet with Illinois Alphas. One of his strongest votes was being able to say that he was a lifetime member or had met a lifetime membership status with Alpha Phi Alpha. Full stop. No one has knocked on my door. No one has sent me an email. No one has come to my classes. No one has sought office hours to ask my counsel when it comes to this matter of denouncing, renouncing Black letter organizations or the like. But what I would say, if someone did come to me with this conundrum, is that in many ways for me, my relationship with my sorority is another way that I live into my faith. I've watched a handful of the videos, and I'm watching how they are leveraging the biblical text. And so I would lead with saying, for me, my biblical foundation is found in the first book of our canon. That part when creation is done, and then the verse that God said, and it was very good. And so this whole notion of all creation is good is the baseline for how I approach this work of living into my faith as a Christian woman. And then for me, the larger theological concern becomes the well-being of all creation. One of the ways that I work towards making, ensuring that the world in which we live creates space for everyone to be well, aligns very nicely with the historical foundation of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, as well as our current foci, which have to do with empowering families, building economic wealth, enhancing the communities and environments in which we live, advocating for social justice, and lifting the local community. All of that to me works together for the well-being of all creation. And so I do not see or experience great conflict between the two bodies, the body of Christ and the sorority.
You know, and that kind of dovetails into the next question I want to ask, and I want to direct this to Brother Woods. You know, as you have served in churches in both Chicago and Indiana, and you've with the work that you have done in terms of mentoring young men and helping to try to get them to an area, do you think it's valid, or I shouldn't say valid, but when we look at the acts that we do as members of Black Greek letter organizations, and then we look at ourselves or yourself as status as a minister of the gospel, as a pastor, do you find that that is a valid thing to bring up when people are commenting about what we are not, to talk about what we are. Like, how do you feel when that is come up, and do you feel that's a valid thing to bring up, given the work that you have done in the collective communities?
Yes, and thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone tonight. I kind of want to touch the first question as well, if I may, because my initial response was not a lot. I felt like it was individual choice, so I kind of brushed it off. But as it began to proliferate, then I had to ask the question, not what they were doing, but why they were doing it the way they were doing it. I think that became the more important question for me, and not only that, but why it is that we have a interesting proclivity to need to demonize someone or something when a relationship does not work out. And so it's not enough to just say this was not compatible with where I am, but something had to be the bad guy in the story. And so that was kind of where my mind went more than anything. I'm sure we'll talk later about how I fit it all in the same box. But I think my greater concern, again, was just how it was being carried out. Was it clickbait? Is this for likes and views? Like, where are we going with this? And more importantly, why are we doing it the way that we're doing it?
I think one of the things that is interesting, one of the things that I've talked about, I've been talking about this stuff personally for well over 30 years. And I have engaged people in debates. You can still find some of those, me going back and forth with some people on the internet pre-social media. But one of the things I wonder is, why now? What is it? Because none of this is new. And that this has been going on. But I did do an informal survey of some elder members, both of my fraternity and other organizations, who people were made like in the 50s and 60s, and asked them, did any of this happen in your day? Most of them said no. It really started happening after with the Black Power movement. So with the the Black Panthers coming up and the Black awareness and Black nationalism that we started seeing in the 70s, that seemed to be where this stuff started coming out, although then it was more cultural. It was more, oh, you guys are following Greek gods. You all got Greek letters. Why can't you have African letters? Why, you don't do all that? And something shifted, I think, somewhere in the 90s where the Christian criticism started coming in. And so one of the questions that I have, and I'll throw this out to everyone, is my question is, why now? What is it about our climate? What is it about our communities? What is it, outside of, we have to put social media in the mix of it. But I think there's something else that is happening, even though it's all the same stuff that they've been saying for a number of years. But over the last few years, we've been seeing this stuff over and over again. So, one of my questions is, and I think this is a little bit of what Brother Woods alluded to. Why now? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think you answered the question, Brother Smoot. We live in the age of social media. You can easily become a celebrity within one post. Even bad press is still press, and most of the ones that I've seen, they fall within a generation. And this is not to make a sweeping generalization about a generation. However, when you take a look at those that I've seen, YouTube clips and the like, they fall into a certain generation that really fall into what everyone thinks about their decision about whatever they're doing. And now you take that, and I think the elephant in the room, not with us, but just among the conversations that probably are happening, but no one really wants to talk about it, is the faith leaders that are manipulating the mind of these men and women that lead them to make this decision. And so I think that's why it's so not won't say prevalent now, but that's why we're seeing it so much now, because we have access to social media, and if you want to become popular, just put it on YouTube and somebody will grab it and then they'll roll with it.
I agree. Anybody else? It looked like Sister Watkins, Sister Russell, you were looking like you were looking to get into this.
Go ahead, Watkins. I'll follow you.
Oh, yeah, you're muted.
Oh,
Sister
I said,
Watkins.
Watkins, I'll follow
The
you.
tenured professor. Go ahead. I was going to defer to my tenured colleague.
Thank you very much. I do recognize that we do not have any denouncers represented in this conversation.
Right.
And so I want to be clear that without them, we can talk about the potential effect of what they're doing, but we can't really speak to motive.
Right.
Because we don't know what their motives are. But I was struck a little bit by something that one of my colleagues, Dr. Tamora Lomax, said recently. And she walked right up to the line when in discussing this denunciation thing, when she talked about that these organizations, the D9, are really groups of organizers. And that got me thinking that really one of the effects that we're seeing is that the power and the strength of the organizing organizations is being challenged by this. I also find it interesting that this is happening right around the time that our political community is very fragmented, is very polarizing, and there are major decisions that need to be made in the next year or two. So I find it interesting that all of a sudden people are having trouble with those organizations that organize primarily in the Black communities. We don't hear anybody talking about denouncing Bam Rush. There was a whole Netflix series on sorority life at the University of Alabama, which really had to do with sorority life at PWIs. There's been no conversation about what's going on with these secret societies that are made popular in movies that are represented by things that may or may not have happened at Yale University. I'll just leave that there. Right. There's no conversation around, there's a whole lot of conversation around these people are making vows. People make vows all the time. Yep. Nobody's announced these are the military, but for some reason, there's this groundswell of people who, and the impact of the groundswell seems to be that they're calling into question the validity and the power of organizations that have been on the front line of organizing minoritized votes and bodies. And so I just want to point out that I don't know what these people's motives are, but one of my concerns is what might be the impact of it.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up, and I'm going to go to you, Sister Watkins, in a second. But I just want to point out one of the things that I did, and we, the District of Illinois, we did a discussion a few years ago about the impact of the D9 organizations on the last presidential election. And I will say that in my time as a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, I have never seen the D9 organizations mobilized the way we mobilized during the last presidential election. You know, part of it was to get, Madam Vice President elected as being a product of a HBCU and a member of a D9. But I think that showed a lot of power because I saw the AKs and the Deltas out on first I had never seen before. And it was impressive, but I'm sure some people got scared. And so, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up. Sister Watkins, I just want to bring up that aspect because that's what made me think of when she talked about being organizers. So you look like you were about to add.
Well, I agree, with what has been said in regards to our present context, social media. We've always had some number of persons who have, in our respective organizations, that have chosen to denounce or renounce privately. But now you have media, culture, and celebrity. You also, to Dr. Russell's point around the attack on Black organizing bodies. Um, I have been thinking about this why now question, and I pose it not as one who thinks that I know it all, but I pose in hopes of hearing from others about this. Might there be a relationship between our hyper Christianized environment that comes with a presumptive Republican nominee like Donald Trump, the association with white American evangelicalism and issuing its own Bibles with the American flag inscribed upon it? We are in a hyper environment of white Christian nationalism that would pose other questions, follow-up questions, such as, is there a relationship, between the nation's immigration crisis, and particularly the crisis is around the rising anxiety about the influx of undocumented persons from non-European countries. Okay, the rise of racialized voter suppression, particularly in southern states, and the fragility overall of Black American citizenship. I think, and this need to prove oneself as truly American by denouncing allegiances to these Black organizing bodies that don't perform patriotism, or what a recent scholar has termed white Christian supremacy. Why now? And lastly, I pose the question of, is there a relationship between the need to support Israel? Not because of the historical precarity of Jewish life over the past 3.5 centuries, but out of fear of not supporting Israel or being a African person not in alignment with what is American, or the threat of being un-American. And what I'm saying here is not, I don't think that the sister at Howard was thinking about all of these global implications, et cetera, so forth. However, we are thinking about how these kind of questions, the need to present oneself and to align oneself in a very public way on a public platform, does cater to not only a personal kind of currency, carrying personal currency, but a proximity to what is acceptable, proximity to and what I'm talking about here are the ways that we each navigate. And this is something else that Dr. Lomax expressed in another conversation, are these survival mechanisms. Dolores Williams described them as survival intelligences, where Black faith is used as an avenue to negotiate survival and the survival of one's community in the face of such hostilities. So those are just some questions that come up as I think about its relationship to these denouncements and our overall global predicament, but also on a social level.
Well, I think you brought up a couple of points, and that when we talk about patriotism, we're told that if you're not out chanting, USA first, America first, waving the American flag out, that you're not a patriot. And I find a correlation between that. One of the things that I've always posited is one of the reasons some of these Christians, Christian criticisms comes, is because we don't mention Jesus every other word, because we don't mention Christianity every other word, that we have certain things. We say that we are not Christian organizations, but we are Christian influence. And I think it seems to me that some of the criticism does come with not only a almost desire to say, well, you don't mention Jesus enough. You're not doing service projects aren't being done in the name of Jesus. They're being done in the name of Alpha Kappa Alpha or Phi Beta Sigma or Omega Psi Phi instead of being done in the name of Jesus. Or when you like our fraternity prayer, people get that twisted, not understanding the meaning and the nuances there. So I bring that up to say, and particularly, I don't know, Brother Woods, if you have any thoughts, or Brother Jakes, of is there anything about basically, I think of something that Reverend Walter Baldrick, who is now presiding elder at AME Church, but during my ordination services, my ordination process, used to talk about there are some Christians who are too Christocentric to actually see Christ. And I wonder if there is any elements of this, of the need to see Jesus and God in everything and not accepting anything that deviates away from it, kind of similar to what our issues with patriotism are now. Brother Woods, Brother Jakes, you got any thoughts on that? Or
Yeah, I kind of think the same thing. And I think the question that you raise is, what does it mean to see God as part of something? Do we need to have his name per se called, or her name per se called? Or can, and I'll just be generic here, but can acts of love be seen as seeing God in an act without calling on her name? And I think that's the important part. And I kind of like what Dr. Watkins was saying, that we begin to skew our theology in a way that we don't allow other acts of service to enter into the box, which actually does a greater disservice to the people that we call to serve. I had to sit and think about it for a second, and I really said to myself, what part of this is conflicted with my Christianity? And I walked my mind through every step, and I just couldn't find it. And I want to respect the opinions of others that may have felt offended by whatever happened. But at the end of the day, I really do think it comes down to, how do we recognize the Spirit of God? Where do we recognize the Spirit of God? And what do we choose to call the Spirit of God in certain experiences?
Totally. Brother Jakes, you want to chime in on that one?
It's not. It's for me. It's just not. It's not as. I don't believe it's as deep as it can possibly be made. I think that Dr. Rousseau, and I hope I'm saying your last name correctly, said it best, because we do not have a denouncer or someone, and I don't want to say it that way. Someone who denounced or renounced on here makes it difficult to try to get into the mind other than what they have said. And what many have said is that it does not align with their beliefs. And because it doesn't align with their beliefs, then we have to get into the question of, well, what do you believe? And why do you believe it? And should what you believe align with what we believe? Well, it seems to me that if what you believe does not align with what we believe, then the best thing for you to do is to say, you know what, this is just not for me. I think the other thing is that with those who renounce and denounce, that the challenge for us who see it is why, and I think Dr. Watkins may have said this, why is there a need to do it publicly? Why is there a need to put in the document what has happened during your initiation? What's the need for you to allegedly expose whatever the secrets are of the organization? I think that's a little bit more of a deeper conversation that needs to be had. But as it relates to what a person believes, I think it's just as simple as they say it. It doesn't align with what they believe, although, those of us, the five of us, have had an education, had gone through the Red Seas of the academy. We realize that others have not. And because they have not, they are functioning from a theology that's not, most of it is not rooted in academics and academic understanding, but based upon what they just truly believe in. You know, they indoctrinate others, and persons want to be, so close to God, and because they want to be so close to God, our organizations doesn't represent that for them. And
Well, we have a quote up right now. Just real quick, just kind of piggybacking a little bit. Everyone does good works and good acts. It doesn't mean much without the proclamation of Jesus Christ for believers. Going on with what we just have been talking about. I'd like to offer that up as does anyone. How do you feel? What's your thoughts when you see a statement like that?
Well, it
So
doesn't mean much to who, because it means something to the recipient of those acts. And I'll just throw that out there.
yeah, this is my sweet spot. But that other part of the canon, there's a quote there that says, "We ought to be living epistles. People ought to be able to read the gospel in how we act, how we carry ourselves, and the thing that we do." So I shouldn't have to. Ideally, one should not need to say in the name of Jesus, or because I'm a Christian, I'm getting ready to do so and so, such and such. Just do it and let your light shine, and things will work out. Full stop. Secondly, I also don't want this to be a distraction. That while these organizations were moving right on along, doing their work for the community, now we've got to pivot and put energy around addressing this concern. I just want to make sure that does not become a distraction such that we're off our game when we should be standing firmly in what we set out to do. And I'm not convinced that the work is diametrically opposed. I can staff the voter registration booth as part of my sorority chapter's initiative on a Saturday morning, and turn around that next Monday and help people get to the polls as part of my local church outreach. I don't think that they're diametrically opposed. And I think one of the impacts or one of the effects of some of what we're seeing is this idea that the organizations are bifurcate. There's a bifurcation happening within the community, and I'm not convinced that that's true.
I want to pivot real quick just because of a comment that was just posted up. Actually brings up a point I want to bring up a little later, but since the quote came up, while we're right, we don't have any denouncers with us, and we can't know what's in their mind. I do also think at the same time, we should not pretend that we as D9 members are completely perfect, and that we are not, we do not have areas where we can improve or can do some things differently. One of the things that I look at, and definitely throw this out to everyone, is I don't think we collectively do a good job of explaining not only our rituals, but our processes, what things mean. I don't think we always do a good job of explaining the symbolism and the metaphors behind certain things, which leads to, in my opinion, at least, certain misunderstandings. So what I would put out to those of you here is, in what ways do you think, and again, I will admit, we have less than 1% of people who are denouncing, but they're putting stuff out on social media, so it's gaining traction. And this should not be a major issue, but it should be something that should be, I believe, that should be addressed at least every now and then. But what, as members of D9 organizations, as those of us who may be in positions of leadership, like Brother McKinnis, like Brother Jakes. What do you think we as organizations could do differently or better to help to assuage this, to kind of stem the tide of this?
And when you ask that question for clarity, Brother Smoot,
Yeah,
are you meaning as it relates to the process? Are you talking about post-initiation, conversation? You made mention that we do not do a good job in letting persons know, and I kind of can't speak for other organizations, of what the symbolism is behind each stage of the process. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, and yes. I mean, and I'm looking at it as a very broad aspect, in terms of how we engage these discussions with people, both before, during, and after. Well, during and after initiation process. What types of should we be better at doing continuing education, for lack of a better term? Those types of things. I'm wondering, because some of what I'm seeing is, I personally just see a lot of misunderstandings from people who are not explaining things too very well. So that's why I put this out. If we think, particularly for those of us who are Christian, do have theological training, academic training, there are things we can explain very quickly that maybe don't necessarily get explained. So where is our responsibility? Because again, I don't think it's all on the people who are denouncing. I don't think it's all on the naysayers. I personally think we have a role to play in this, and we should be honest about that. I love my frat to death, but not everything we do is perfect. So if we're going to be honest about what the other people are saying about us, let's be honest about what we're doing or not doing. So I guess I'm asking, what are the things that we could collectively be doing better as organizations to help to assuage this, either during or after initiation processes?
And Brother Smoot, I think you hit the nail on the head as it relates to us. I know brothers who would cut off their left arm for the frat.
Right.
This is like, bro, like, is it really that serious? And so when you have persons who love the organization so much that their lives are totally consumed by the organization, and you have them part of a process to bring someone else in who says to them that your passion must be as strong as mine, and you should be really ready to die for this, especially a person of faith whose faith says, no, I shouldn't be dying for this. Christ died for it. In the case of Christianity, Christ died for me. Why do I have to die for this? You're right. That falls on us. So I think you hit the nail on the head, that there's some the leaven of self-examination that
See, I knew you
were with us. So I'll pause there.
Dr. Smoot, I will say this. I'm sorry. I think Dr. Michelle was trying to chime in. Come on, girl. Do your thing.
No, I was going to say, I think this is where it's important to note. And I can't watch another denouncer video. It's just overload. And part of it is not, I've watched like 12 or 13 of them just over the past week, in responding to having different conversations, but also for my own personal knowledge and awareness, to hear from persons themselves, right, who have made this decision. And it normally has arisen out of deep personal conviction and Christian orientation. And I say this because, yes, we need to do a better job. And I think in the different our respective organizations have their respective and correspondent ethics committees to deal with, to help us be better representations of what our oaths carry and what we're about. We don't see in mass, though, this opposition against the experiences of persons who've had sexual violence, hazing, forms of different forms of dehumanization, et cetera, so forth, on this scale, though. And the question, why? Because there's more currency with Christianity than there is in opposing violence to Black bodies. We're okay with violence to Black bodies. That in terms of what, when we think of what is being said, who also says this? Who also benefits from the negation, or not opposing, even publicly on a grand scale, these experiences and clearly ethical violations to Black bodies? I think there are ways that we can support persons in their, journey of renouncing and denouncing and coming to terms with their maybe incompatibility with belief. What I'm noticing, and if we don't take anything else from this, is that there is in every denouncement video that I've read, that I've viewed, that I've transcribed in TurboScribe through AI, there is no conversation or meditation on the institutions, their respective organizations, and service. There is often an issue with how the internal dynamics, one, textual criticism. So criticism when it comes to what is written in our rituals and what is exercised in rituals and ceremonies. And that is where I'm seeing more of the biblical and theological interpretation that is in alignment with white Christian nationalistic sensibilities. However, there are legitimate concerns when it comes to quote unquote unsisterly or unbrotherly behavior, et cetera, so forth, that I think are worth continually trying to improve, upon. But there is a disconnect with the service, with the public service and ministry, which is, when I was praying and I was, a super Christian, in undergrad at different points, being a good United Methodist, praying about whether or not, no, it wasn't even whether or not God, it was God, let me please make line. That's what the prayer was. And then it evolved, okay, by the time I was in graduate education, to God, is this your will? And what I got, okay, was this is your choice, because you can serve me inside it and outside of it. And so, the profound neglect or the disconnect between the overemphasis on textual-based criticism, which is consistent with biblical literalism, and our desire and legacy as African Americans, and deep, tensions that exist with that legacy of biblical literalism toward our dehumanization. All of this emphasis with the lack of historicism and the lack of connection to the actual ministerial arms of our organizations is profound, and for me is what lacks full accreditation in my mind, or legitimacy in terms of a full robust argument. So that's my thoughts in terms of some of the things that I have seen and noted in what denouncers and persons who have denounced have expressed publicly. The biblical lyricism is problematic, which leads to the textual lyricism in our own documents. So that's profound, and the disconnect with the ministry of public service.
If I jump in, I want Brother Smoot, you had I guess you put that up there. It said the Cleveland boy.
Yeah.
Because he ushered in another aspect of the conversation. Of course, we're talking about Christians, but you have quite a few renouncers that did not renounce or denounce, that had nothing to do with their faith,
Right.
but all to do with what Dr. Watkins said about the harm and the infliction on the Black bodies, pre and post initiation. One of the things that he mentioned was the hazing that happens afterwards, because you were paper and you weren't made right, and and whether folks understand that still has plays an effect on one's psychology. It's mind-blowing. So you still have a subset of people who are like, you know what, if this is what brother and sisterhood is all about, I don't want it. So now we have that aspect of it. It has nothing to do with faith, but it has all to do with, going back to what you said earlier, Brother Smoot, how we have to hold ourselves accountable for what we do with the process, in the process, educating about the process, and then how we, as supposed to be brothers and sisters, embrace one another and not bastardize each other after the process because my process wasn't your process.
And to answer your earlier question, Dr. Smoot, I think the same thing with the fraternity is the same thing that I ask myself with the church. Where is the forum where we can ask the critical questions and yet our patriotism is not called into question? If I ask certain questions in the church, all of a sudden I'm a heathen. There's no faith. How dare you say, how did he part the Red Sea? How dare you say, how could Jesus get up? I think in the fraternity, it's the same way. And so to answer, how can we be a better part of the process? Creating these types of forums where you can really dig into those critical questions, knowing that I'll still be loved at the end of the day, despite what I share in that conversation, and that I will not be looked at as less patriotic or less than because I bring these questions. And so I think honestly, a lot of these questions are carried around in a lot of hearts unspoken because we haven't had those forums. And maybe some people would be less likely to denounce if we were just having a little more open conversation to address some of these issues. It doesn't mean we'd answer or get to the bottom of it, but sometimes just being heard, sometimes finding that others are like-minded, that also has a very therapeutic and continuing effect as well. And I've raised the same critique of the church that raises the fraternity. Where do we create those critical thinking forums that we can share?
And it's interesting you bring that up because in my studies, and I'm gonna slip my historian hat on for a moment here. But when I study the origins of not only Alpha, but I've looked into the origins of the other organizations. There was there's a definite intellectual impetus that was present in our organizations, really, particularly at the beginning, be out of necessity, because we had to. We were in a situation. I always tell the story of, recount the stories. The Kappas like telling a story of how one of their founders, going to class on the campus of Indiana University, had to walk by bodies that had been lynched and that had been up for 2 or 3 days. And they had to walk by that every day just to get to school, just to go to class. We have other instances of how our organizations coped with the threat of 20th century, turn to 20th century white supremacy and violence and the conflation of Jim Crow laws just to get an education. And so there was a focus on intellectualism, getting your education. That seemed to be the focus. And then somehow we've moved to a point where we were viewed as part of Du Bois's elite, talented 10th. We're looked at being the saviors of the community, to somehow being twisted that we're demon spawn. And when we look at how we've gone from being viewed 100 years ago to how we're being viewed now, and not just regarding, the denouncement stuff, but it's a lot of different aspects when we look at the history, how it has changed and evolved. And when we talk about the history, we don't pause enough to acknowledge what our founders had to go through to create our organization, and how we are still trying to uplift that legacy. And so we like to talk a lot about our history, who our famous members are, who our distinguished members are, but could we be better at talking about what we've done and what we do, and showing that we are, stewards of our communities, that we are having an impact, looking at the impact that we have had on our communities, both historically and currently, asking those and making spaces for those uncomfortable conversations.
I think it's a valid charge. When we, even as a historian, as there is, wherever there was the inception of a new organization, or the budding rumblings of wanting to come out of one organization to another, particularly talking about the Divine Nine. In each of those instances, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Smoot, when you see these developments, it is largely comes out of a concern of being too disconnected from community, or too disconnected from those to whom we are responsible to, that because we were all founded on college campuses, there is an inherent elitism that is there. That whether to be an active member in our organizations, we've had to wrestle with that elitism, while at the same time understanding that many of our founders were part of these founding these organizations because of a need and a deep desire and conviction to be responsible, and to take the gifts and graces, the positions and the power that come with that comes with our positions in education, to benefit the masses, and particularly Black communities, and more specifically poor Black communities. And so, while there was this evolving or consistent concern for needing to be held to greater accountability to our communities out of which we emerge, there is the present or the constancy of the elitism, right? And I do think that that's something that, until we change fundamentally the core of our membership intake, the core of even, would take some departures from our founding principles. Without that kind of radical shifting, the elitism is something that we will always have to wrestle with. The other thing I want to say that may be important to some, and that is organizations, while they may be based on Christian principles, all of our members are not Christians.
Right. It's an important
Our
point.
Line Sisters is Sunni, and there were things that we did not do in solidarity with her, and I'm gonna just say that. Mm-hmm. And so the other thing is, there is pressure that comes through the lens of Christianity to press us ethically, which I think should be heard. But in terms of conformity, conformity or changes or things that we have to do in order to do better, I do think we ought to think about the extent to which we are representing the diversity within our organizations, that religious diversity within our organizations.
Dr. Watkins, you bring up something very important that you've put something on my mind, because the question then becomes, are you, is one a slave now to their faith?
Oh, oh, oh.
As opposed to, you kind of saying, I didn't want to be a slave to the organization, but now are you a slave to Christianity? Or because you bring it up, but I've not heard of any brothers in Alpha who are Muslim renouncing or denouncing. I mean, even in my chapter, one of our beloved brothers, he's atheist, and when I tell you, well, we give him the loving blues, but in a loving way, because we like to joke around, but at the end of the day, he has no. You would think he would be the one to renounce and denounce, but
he's clear. He's clear.
Yeah.
He's on the difference and the distinction. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. That was good. That was good. Dr. Rousseau, you talking a whole lot, and you just need to give somebody else a chance to talk.
Someone asked me earlier. I just keep coming back to this whole idea of, it seems as though the issue is, are we able to navigate the realities that two separate realities that can't be reconciled? And I don't think that we're dealing with diametrically opposing realities. And so I think that for me, there has been no conflict. There's little to no confusion. But I also, as a practicing Christian, as an ordained clergywoman, I would be remiss if I did not go on record and say, if you think your engagement with any organization challenges your faith relationship, then do what you need to do to maintain your faith relationship. Full stop.
I will say this. I'm a I'm an 80s made brother. Before certain things
happen. Like it. You said it like we will be surprised, but you look like it. Yep, shots fired.
Yeah, Jakes, we're gonna talk after this. But here's the thing though. When I was pledging during the heyday of the hazing stuff that was going on, I'm not gonna pretend that I wasn't hazed. There was one thing that we were never refused, and that was the ability to go to church. If we told our dean, hey, I need to go to church or I need to go to Bible study, we will always say, oh, absolutely, go deal with it. Now, I know, my chapter is, this is, I don't think it's as unusual, but, based on my experience, other people, they say that these organizations pull you away from your faith. And my experience, and I know the experience of a number of others, where our faiths were encouraged and celebrated. And I think that's one thing that, I love the fact that, I have the picture of my ordination, and of the 8 people surrounding me, laying hands on me, 5 of them are alphas. And I'm told they were pushing each other, they were pushing people out of the way to get to it. And what I wonder is there is a joy that a number of us experience in being in these organizations. There's a joy, there's a pride, and there is something that sticks with us. Do any of you think that there are those who think that joy and that pride should only be reserved for the church, or that you can't have joy, you shouldn't have joy out of anything else but Jesus?
Yeah, I'll start first and say that my model for this was my father. And anybody who knew him would be able to say that there were Floyd Russell was crazy about his family, his church, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and Tuskegee University. Everything else fell, work, being on the CAPS, which the Chicago area police thing, and Bot Club, and all of the mentoring young men, and all that comes after. But family, his faith, his fraternity, and his undergraduate institution, and they all work together. I saw it all work together seamlessly, and in ways that were encouraging to me.
And as someone who knew your father, I can attest to, I don't know if we'll have to talk offline about when I first came to institutional and he wanted to introduce me to people. But you bring up a great point, because a great example, because he was like a lot of others who had a lot of pride in that. But again, there are people who I've heard one of the criticisms is, oh, look, you're more proud of Alpha than you are of God or of your church, and that seems to be one of the criticisms, Brother Woods.
Yeah, I just want to kind of flat-footed say, and this is just my personal perspective, I think it's one, how you choose to carry it in your life. And I think two, it's the role that you expect it to play in your life. And I think that's going to vary from person to person. Mm-hmm. I agree with Dr. Jakes. I know brothers that'll cut off a hand for A Phi A. I'm not that brother. Yep. It plays a different role in my life. And so because I saw Alpha Phi Alpha as my community service vehicle, I did not come to it as a faith tenet or to be my religion or any of those things. And so I did not have to create this weird dichotomy in my mind, because I understood the role that it would play in my life. And I think that's where it starts to shift, is that, yes, some people have it high, some people have it low. What I will say is this: I found that there was no other place that I could stand next to my agnostic brother, my Muslim brother, and my Christian brother, and my atheist brother, and take 25 black boys camping to talk about what it means to be a good young black man and do some type of productive community work in that vein, other than this organization. And so again, because I have that position in my life that is being satisfied through the fraternity, that's how I'm able to reconcile all of it. But I think, again, it goes back to, what role did you really expect this? Some people, this is the entirety of their identity formation. And right. We can go into a whole lot of tangents on that. But again, I think personally, you have to say to yourself, what role is this going to play? And then I think from there, you begin to analyze how it intersects with the other aspects of your life. But again, that's so personal that it's going to be a moving target from person to person.
I want to get ready. We're a little bit past the.
May I chime in for something very quickly? Because Dr. Woods, you're absolutely correct. Our Midwest executive director, who is probably still watching, is Brother Quincy Banks, and my bestest friend. I will cut off my right arm to save his life, not because of Alpha,
right, but
because he's my brother.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's just sometimes we've made Alpha, or we've made organizations our gods. The other thing I want to add is something you said earlier, Dr. Smoot, is that there's and this is for everyone watching, and I'm not saying you don't have to agree, but I think it's also important to be careful when one says the word of God says. It's like, okay, well, you got to be careful, because are you worshiping the Bible, or are you worshiping the God of the Bible?
Ooh,
there's a difference.
Say that again.
The two. Yeah, because there's a lot of biblical idolatry out there. And God is not in it. And it becomes a superimposition, if you will, of, well, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, without having really any tangible knowledge of what the Bible really says. you have 5 preachers on here, and I guarantee you, if we told you what the Bible really says, you think your faith would be shot. Your faith would really, really, really be shot. So I just wanted to just put that out there.
Well,
thank you.
And actually, I want to go back, Brother McKinnis. Can you put that quote back up from Monique Johnson that you just had up, talking about the oaths and the covenants? And I'm gonna preface this in typical pastor speak. We're gonna get ready to take our seats, but I just got one more minute, so just to what we have not really dealt with, and the quote that just came up. It's not about pulling away from your faith. It's about following what the Word of God has to say about making oaths, bowing before altars, tables, participating in rituals and covenants. I, again, in my time in discussing this, I have gone into the whole thing about oaths at length. But I want to put this out to our panel. What is it? I mean, you can just address the quote, is it, what about the making oaths and bowing before altars and tables and participating in rituals and making covenants? How would you guys address that? And I'll just throw that out to anybody. Brother Jakes, you need to stop laughing.
I'm waiting to hear from our Old Testament scholar.
I think somebody's being called out.
In the interest of time and without the benefit of context, I will offer these pieces. I always tell my students that context matters. And so when we pick up the sacred text, for us, the Christian canon runs between Genesis and Revelation, the books of Genesis and Revelation. We always have to hold that text in tension with the fact that it was written at a particular period of time by people who were living on a particular patch of land, by an even smaller group of scribes and those who sponsored the scribes who had a particular set of motives. And all of those things are not always a one-to-one transference for 21st century post-industrial revolution existence, A. B, when we think about ritual is a human thing. Ritual is a healthy way that humans mark important moments in their lives. And so we have rituals that are part of our ways of being that are beyond what happens at an induction ceremony for a fraternal organization. Or communion on first Sundays in some of our churches. That between those two, there are rituals happening all the time. It's how we make meaning, how we make understanding of things. And so without the time and the benefit of walking people through the social historical background associated with the ancient text and its ancient Near Eastern context, I think that we want to be very careful about, I think it was Ranita Weems at one point who talked about people thought it was bicycling through the Bible, and what she was meaning was they would go over there, they pick a text, they drive over another place and pick another text, proof testing or a cherry picking text to help to make a point. And so without the benefit of the context of how all of that is being used, I don't have much else to say about the matter. Yeah.
Sister Watkins, Brother Woods.
So I want to echo just that if persons feel as they are going through various rituals and practices. They feel that they are being called in some way, shape, or form to deviate from the God of their formation and understanding and tradition. That they have to make a decision to be loyal to those to that discernment. There is I'm operating, and you can see this part of my virtual background features Osiris and the four sons of Horus, and they're there because I want to intimate that we are surrounded by symbols and significations. And what I mean by that is, I don't have a problem thinking about or being inspired by Greek philosophy, moral systems, because those are not my gods. Right? Like, I'm clear on who I serve. I'm also clear, and I'm thinking about Black Athena. I'm thinking about Stolen Legacy. I'm clear that that African humanism can exist, unlike white / Western European humanism. African humanism can exist and does exist alongside religion, not as a replacement of it. And I am deeply convinced that in the rituals, the robes, the ceremonies, etc., so forth, are ways of marking that our founders understood would be significant through repetition, through generation, in order to impart these moral principles that defy time and space, which has to do with service outside of oneself and to man and womankind. And if there was a disconnect, as there was in the biblical worlds, because we're not just talking about one world, but in the biblical worlds that were requiring sacrifices, that were requiring distinct deviations from the practice of the faith, that is life affirming. And so if these rituals, practices, etc., interfere, or for me cause me to not be life affirming but death dealing, then that's a problem. Then I got to step away from whatever that association or affiliation is. And sometimes that's the church.
Well, I mean, yeah, nice. You always know someone said something when they make a statement and they make preachers silent. So you always know when somebody says something. Just real quick last point, Brother Woods. Any comments on the taking of oaths or making of covenants? And then
I just didn't know if this was last remarks. Is that what we're doing?
I'm about to get to that in a second.
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, like I said, it is man, this has been great. You guys have been amazing. I want to thank you all for taking your time, for your effort and your energy, and from behind the scenes, from putting up with me and Jake's talking smack back and forth to each other. One thing that I did say, that I always say, that no matter what organizations that we are in, we tend to form kind of a family. We tend to form kind of a relationship. And I think sometimes that familial relationships is misunderstood by those who do not, cannot, or have not partaken of it. And so sometimes that creates a little bit of jealousy. And when we talk about these issues, what I'm hoping is that we can take information that was shared here and spread it forth as just as valid and things to think about when dealing with these issues. So as I prepare to close, I would ask Brother McKinnis if you could come back and let me let me give everyone a moment to say a last word. I'll start with you, Brother Woods. Any parting thoughts, sage wisdom that you want to that you would like to share with us?
It seems to me, and this is more of a societal observation, that we've moved into this place where unless I can agree with you 100% on everything, I can't do anything with you.
Mm.
And we easily can see differences much more so than we're trained to see similarities. And going back to what Dr. Watkins said, it's particularly problematic in our community where our unity is essential to our survival. And so I think to myself, is there anybody I agree 100? I don't even agree 100% with my mama, but hey, that doesn't stop me from ending the relationship. So to easily find these points of deference and then use them to justify, this parting of ways is just very problematic for me. I see this as my social service vehicle. I see this as a place where we can come together to address greater societal ills. Hunger does not care what fraternity you're in. Disease does not care what sex you are. Homelessness does not care what your political affiliation is. And so I had some preachers critique me for having a Quran on my desk. And I said to them, look, if the Nation of Islam is effectively reaching Black men that are incarcerated, why can't we join in on that and argue about Jesus when we get done? And that's how I see this, as a common ground for us to come together, work community service, and make our community better. And we can have all these deep theological discussions later. But for me, that's what this is. I'm a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha. I love the programs we do, working with the young men in our community that are so needed. And I thank you again for having me on this panel.
Thank you, Brother Woods. Dr. Watkins?
Final thought, just it's been a pleasure to begin what I hope will be a series of conversations in a number of different spaces that will take many of these introspective questions and internally as well as externally from our organizations to be able to have some real critical conversations. I think we're concerned about denouncers, but I think these conversations will help inactive members because that is a large constituency in all of our organizations that would benefit greatly from creating space, time, and devoting energy to thinking about the refinement of our organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Watkins. My dear Sister Russell.
Yeah, my final thoughts are pretty much the same that I've had along the way. So at this point, I would say thank you again for the invitation to come and share and talk out loud with this group.
And I guess, Brother Jakes, I guess.
Well, my final thoughts would be to those who are watching who have renounced and denounced. I mean, it's clear based on some of the comments that were shown that we have some brothers and sisters that are watching, and I want you to know, one, that if someone has made you feel, and I'm not talking about even here, even though I don't believe it was here, but even here, made you feel less than or triggered because of the decision you made, I apologize for that. No one hates you because of the decision you've made. You made a decision, and we're trying to help ourselves to become better so that we don't continue having this as we move into the future in our 9 organizations. But do know that you're still loved and respected because you're our brothers and sisters, point blank, period. You're our Black brothers and sisters. And so it would be antithetical to who we are as Black people, who we are as people of the faith, and antithetical to who we are as members of these organizations, to now all of a sudden say, we can't have anything to do with you, as Dr. Wood say, because we don't agree with what happened. So hopefully you at least log off or walk away knowing that no one's angry with you or mad at you. We're just trying to get an understanding, and wish you well and see you out there on the journey.
Thank you, Brother Jakes, for that. I just want to reiterate, I'm hoping that there are people who've been able to take something from this and move forward. We will, as a District of Illinois, will be having other conversations. Yeah, there are a lot of things that we as D9 organizations, aside from this issue, need to be discussing. What I can say on behalf of myself as the historian for the District of Illinois and the co-historian for the Midwest region, that we are committed to having these conversations and these types of conversations because we recognize the power and influence that our organizations do have and how we can affect change, even if it's nothing but creating conversation. So I do want to thank you all for this on behalf of our district director, Dr. Leonard McInnes II, who put this together. He is truly appreciative of all of the time and effort and, putting up with me and putting up with Jakes. I do want to say, I want to thank the.
I made him. Remember, he's Mew Mew.
And where did Mew Mew come from? Yeah, there we go. Sister Russell, I want to thank you, and I want to thank your sister for not coming in and heckling me today. Dr. Watkins, I have a friend who spoke very highly of you. She's also one of your sorors, and man, she did not lie. So thank you for coming on and bringing in. We really need to be having more conversations about the international perspective that you brought. And I'm looking forward to us having those conversations as well. Brother Woods, my AME brother, I joked with McInnes, wondered if he was going to feel, him and Jakes are going to feel a little outclassed having all these AME folks in one space because you know how we AMEs are. So, but Brother Woods, thank you for your perspective and really pushing forth the service aspect of our organizations of what we should be doing. You all have been great. Also, I know our regional vice president, Brother Franklin Stacy, has been paying attention to this. And again, our general president, Brother Willis Lonzer, appreciates you as well. As I get ready to close, I do want to remind everyone again, check out the conversations we did during Black History Month. And those from individuals who have accomplished a number of things who you may not be aware of, but they were completely interesting. In 2 weeks, we are going to be having a conversation discussing the need of enforcing and promoting Black men's health. So please like and subscribe and pay attention as we will have a discussion, brother, another of your people, Brother Jakes, Brother Inya. Inya is going to be joining us who from DC, and Brother Richard Gardner is going to be joining us as well with some other individuals as we talk about, and one thing, and I apologize, one thing I did want to talk about was some of the mental health components that play into this. I do apologize for not bringing that up, but Black health and Black mental health are important aspects in our community. So I hope you can join us at that time for that conversations, and we will have other conversations throughout the year with other individuals who have been making an impact on our community. So with that said, on behalf of the District of Illinois of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, I do again want to thank you. My name is Brother Chuck Smoot as the district historian. Thank you again. Brother McInnes will be sending you all your gift baskets in the mail that Brother Jakes is going to pay for, and and we will see you all next time. I look forward to.
And I don't have that AME money.
No, you got that Baptist money.
I'm not a Baptist bishop, see?
Not yet. So thank you all, and have a good night, and we will talk to you all soon.
That's it?
Yep, that's it. We are
Don't have a hot mic moment, Jakes.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm looking up here at the left corner. It says live.
It still says
It
live.
says live. So, you
They
know,
haven't ended it yet.
I'll kick in a Fred Sanford. How would I be sure that this is love beyond?
All right, my brothers. And on that note, thank you again.
Good conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Hey, by the way, Jakes, I love that shirt, bro. Good choice.
Yeah, yeah. You know, because we didn't have the smoot suit. That's the smoot suit. That's his go-to. Get down.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot.
Hey man,
All right.
good conversation, bro. Smoot. See y'all later.
Thank you.